Have you ever felt like the deeper you think, the harder it becomes to relate to people around you? Like you're speaking a language nobody else understands? You're not alone. In fact, there's a reason why deep thinkers often walk through life feeling like outsiders. Not because they're broken, but because the world wasn't built for minds that question everything. Most people move through life seeking comfort, routine, and social approval. They stay close to what's familiar. But deep thinkers, they pull at the threads of reality. They ask why when others are content with what, and that creates friction. Because society doesn't reward introspection, it rewards conformity. Look through history, and you'll find this pattern repeated again and again. Visionaries like Kierkegaard, Simone Weil, and Nietzsche weren't just brilliant, they were profoundly isolated. Not because they chose solitude, but because society quietly shut the door on them. The truth is, deep thinkers aren't rejected because they're wrong. They're rejected because they make people uncomfortable. And comfort, for most, is more valuable than truth. But let's go deeper. Why does a thoughtful, curious mind trigger such resistance in others? The answer lies in something psychologists call ego preservation. Most people build their identity like a fragile house of cards, made of beliefs, assumptions, and social conditioning. It's stable, but only if left untouched. Now imagine a deep thinker walks in and starts asking real questions. Why do you believe that? What if the opposite is true? Does this actually make sense? Suddenly that house of cards begins to wobble, and people panic. It's not that they hate the deep thinker, it's that the deep thinker becomes a threat to their carefully constructed self-image. There's another force at play here: social cohesion. Human beings are tribal by nature. For most of history, survival depended on the group, not the individual. To be accepted was to be safe. To be rejected was to be in danger. That instinct is still alive in us today. Deep thinkers, by their nature, challenge the consensus. They don't follow the herd. They speak the unspeakable. And in doing so, they disrupt the group dynamic. They risk becoming the outsider, not because they want to, but because their very presence disturbs the fragile peace most people cling to. In a room full of agreeable nods, a single raised eyebrow is enough to cause tension. Now let's look at this from a neurological angle. Studies in neuroscience show that when people are confronted with ideas that challenge their worldview, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes activated. That means deep conversations don't just feel uncomfortable. They literally trigger a stress response in the brain. When you question someone's belief system, you're not just debating, you're threatening a piece of their identity. And the brain treats that as a kind of attack. It's no wonder that intelligent, introspective people are often met with resistance, sarcasm, or even hostility. The deeper the truth, the louder the denial. Even in the digital age, a time when information is everywhere, deep thinkers still struggle to be heard. Why? Because algorithms don't reward complexity. They reward simplicity. They reward outrage, certainty, and sound bites that demand no reflection. Subtlety doesn't trend. Nuance doesn't go viral. This creates an environment where thinkers are drowned out by performers, where questioning is seen as negativity, and where truth is less important than being popular. And in a culture that confuses confidence with wisdom, it's often the loudest voice, not the wisest, that gets heard. But if being a deep thinker brings so much resistance, what's the point? Isn't it easier to just keep things simple? Maybe, but here's the quiet truth. Deep thinking isn't a choice, it's a disposition. You don't choose to question everything. You don't choose to feel out of place at shallow conversations. You don't choose to be haunted by questions others avoid. It's part of who you are. And while it may isolate you from the crowd, it also connects you to something greater. the pursuit of meaning, beauty, and truth. You see the cracks in the system not because you're broken, but because you're awake. And yes, it's heavy, but it's also sacred. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "The wise have always said the same things, and fools, who are the majority, have always done just the opposite." It's a grim observation, but it points to something real. The deeper your insight, the harder it is to be understood. The clearer your vision, the more alone you may feel. But don't let that silence you, because while deep thinkers may be few, their impact runs deep. You are not alone in your isolation. You are part of a lineage of minds who saw what others refused to see, and spoke even when no one wanted to listen. Because in the end, the more you understand, the less you can ignore.